Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live stream. And today I have a very special guest, Professor Stewart Donaldson from Claremont Graduate University, and also the author of this book, Flow 2.0, which we have a Chinese translation for. And Professor Donaldson, do you mind maybe saying hi to everyone in the live stream room?
Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to talk with you today and hear about any questions or comments you have.
Yeah. All right. I think before we get started, I will do a brief intro of Professor Donaldson. He has many, many titles and many accomplishments. And of course, the direct reason is that is this book we have in our hands right now. Again, you can find it in the link below, which is a which is a good thing, I guess, for readers, but a very profound book and also a continuation of a huge body of work that started way earlier. He himself currently is a distinguished university professor at Claremont Graduate University, and also he has been founding member of the positive psychology, many related organizations. I won't go to many names. And also, I think many Chinese audience are familiar now with positive psychology through Seligman's work. But actually, Seligman and Donaldson, and also I guess, the father of flow, Mihaly, they were all in a small cohort of people that pioneered this field of work decades ago. So it's a real privilege. Now we have Professor Donaldson because of his new book, and thanks to the book, I have a chance to have a direct conversation with him about both the sort of development of the field and also how this, every like commoner like ours can benefit from this great body of work. All right, with that, so Stuart, if you don't mind, I actually have a question, kind of out of curiosity, because I saw a clip of you talking about your favorite quote of Peter Drucker. So for people who didn't know, Drucker Deluke, it's his Chinese name, is very famous in China. He's also with the Claremont Graduate University, and they used to be colleagues, right? And then I'm sure Stuart is much younger, but nevertheless, they actually have overlapped professionally. Maybe you start there because you quoted this interesting quote saying you can't manage what you cannot measure, right? I think that was the quote you said. Maybe we start there. Like, why
Okay.
is that a quote, and how is it working with Peter Drucker, and how does that, relate to your body of work?
Okay. Well, great. Thank you. And I I would have given you that question if you would have asked me. So really good question. Um, I have been really, really lucky in my career studying with colleagues and professors that have had profound impacts on the world. And the one that I think really imprinted me and guided me so that I would have that experience was Professor Peter Drucker. So in the 80s, I was really interested in, how do you have a profound impact in the world based on our studies and our, science. And came to Claremont, and at the time, Peter Drucker was teaching in our School of Management. And of course, as the father of modern management, all of the graduate students, wanted to take his courses. It turned out as my career unfolded, he turned into a colleague. We were both on the same faculty and a neighbor. He and his wife lived in our neighborhood, and we went to the same tennis club. And so I had this just wonderful opportunity of getting to know Peter and Doris Drucker personally. And he, as a professor, had what I see as real one-liners that just changed the way you viewed the world. Just by hearing him express that and give examples. But the one that really influenced me was he basically said that unless you can measure what you're talking about, you really can't manage it. And the whole, management field that he developed is based on, your ability to accurately measure something and to monitor it very, carefully. And so I now am on the what's called the Drucker Institute board, where we have an index that we're studying, the Drucker Index, on how you how you measure companies. So that led me into the field of measurement and evaluation, which when I met Mihaly in around 2005, I turned into measuring, what sort of is our, ultimate meaning and purpose and well-being in life, a life, well lived. And I've spent now working with him and all my colleagues in positive psychology, trying to do research and understand, what makes our lives meaningful and rich. And I'm going to tell you some of those secrets here today, at least from a science perspective.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. I didn't know you guys were neighbors too. That's, you know. But you must be, I don't know, like 40 years apart, right? Like how
Are you asking my age? I'm 64, and Peter must be over 100 now if he was alive.
Yeah.
As his house is a couple streets over, and as I walk into our park, there's a big bench. It's Peter Drucker and Doris Drucker quotes some of his famous quotes on it. So I see him fairly regularly when I
Every
go.
day. See, I wasn't wrong about 40 years. You were really young then.
You were right. I was young. Gosh, I wish that happened.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And also, you mentioned Mihaly. I think Mihaly, many Chinese audience are probably not that familiar with. I mean, Seligman, to be honest, is probably the most famous name in China in positive psychology because his first books were
Yeah.
translated. But Mihaly was this remarkable person, just more for the context for my readers, that he's Hungarian, if I was not mistaken, right?
Yes.
So yeah, he was a Hungarian, so he speak with a pretty heavy European accent, and he went through war himself when he was a kid, basically between he was 7 to 10, according to him. That was in the World War II. And he really saw a lot of, as you can imagine, human suffering and adults suffering, like inability to rebuild life with such devastating, experience as we can all imagine. So he ended up starting to study this area, like how do we achieve happiness, and which seemed to be a lofty goal, but it is a science, as what Professor Donaldson was alluding to earlier. And he really opened the field. And then there was actually a TED talk by Mihaly, I think like 20 something years ago, and now have like 7 million views. And then that was way before, like, that was, internet was, or TED was such a widespread thing. So which is remarkable. Yeah, maybe can you share with us a bit of the starting of this field? Because you were basically in that circle, right? When this area was started, because there wasn't such a thing as flow or even positive psychology
Right.
before Mihaly.
Yeah. Remember, I was young then, so I don't go all the way back, but let me talk about how I came in and what was going on and to try to answer your question. So I was a dean at the Claremont Graduate University when Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi retired from University of Chicago. And our colleagues actually in the Drucker School here, Peter Drucker School, reached out and tried to attract him to Claremont, which eventually happened. And he was he would get offers from all over the world because he was so famous and made just a huge impact on regular people's lives, as opposed to just the scientific community. So one day he was leaving. He was going to go to another university, actually one that I worked at before, Claremont. And I sat down with him and his colleague, Gene Nakamura, who is Japanese American. And the reason they were going to leave Claremont was because they offered them this chance to start the first positive psychology program at the PhD level, the doctorate level. And so I spent a lot of time with him explaining why the freeway traffic in LA is horrible and why our little college town in Claremont is wonderful. And he eventually, and I was able to convince, the administration at Claremont, let's do it here. And so at the time, he and Martin Seligman, and if you want, I have a story about how they met and how it originally came out in 1998. But they were trying to develop this field. So I got to know Marty Seligman, and he and Mihaly were, best friends. They were known as, co-founders of the field. And Marty would come and do stuff for us at Claremont, and Mihaly would be working with him in the professional organizations, to the point where in 2013, we did the World Congress in Los Angeles. We're about 30 miles from Los Angeles. But the story I love to tell, it's in my books, is, and you got to know, I'm originally from the UK, but I moved to Southern California and grew up surfing. And surfing is like the main sort of source of flow for me. And so as both Mihaly and Seligman were not surfers, and they had other ways of getting flow. But when they both, explained how this field started, it turned out that they didn't know each other, and they were both in the Hawaiian Islands, and they were at a resort, and it's a place where I've surfed, so I was really keen on this story. And Mihaly went out into the water and got into trouble, the rip current and so forth. And there was a man on the beach that helped him and got him out of the water. And they were walking back to the resort, to give him some aid. He'd been hit on the rocks and so forth. And it turned out it was Marty Seligman. And they had known each other's work, but they'd never met each other. And Marty was on this vacation trying to prepare his APA, American Psychological Association, presidential address. And they spent a week talking about what legacy would we, like to leave for psychology. And that led to, a vision for positive psychology, because most of the work psychologists had done had been helping people who were struggling and suffering. Very, very important work, but they thought it was at the expense of looking at what are the things in life that really help us flourish, reach our potential. And they came up with this idea that we would do it from a scientific perspective. And so I've been involved now, over 20 years, the field about 25, in scientifically trying to understand, how do we live our best lives possible? And how do we help others, flourish in their lives?
Wow. Thank you. As Stewart said, do get a copy of the book. 大家可以在下面看到这本书的链接啊。Yeah, there are not only science in there, there are so many interesting stories. And then as this is just amazing, like how they can end up like basically that's the flow of life brought them to the same beach at the same time for them to meet.
Yeah, I
And then
thought so.
right. Well, thank you for that context and for that interesting story. It feels like there, so many. Again, if reading your work, I'm just so curious. I was like, there must be many, many things happening over the last 25, 30 years in this field, in those interesting people, and of course on science. So go back on this, the topic you mentioned around science, right? So like, I think when the field started, as you said, about like 20 to 30 years ago. And I think PERMA, that idea many people know as well because of the first editions of all the books that came out. So what's new? Like what has developed to 2025, and what's new in this book for people who haven't had a chance of reading? Why 2.0?
Yeah. Well, let me start with the framework that I use and have published a lot on now, and is coming out in a couple of months in a new book, which is Perma 4. I don't know if you've seen that, but I do discuss it in Flow 2.0. And so these are 9 building blocks for human flourishing that have come out of all the science we've done in the field. And when Mahali passed during the pandemic, one of his students and my student and I, we wanted to, give something back to Mahali. We were missing him and so forth. And so we got together and we said, let's, write a book that is not, for scientists like we really, write books for. Let's see if we can write a book, for general people that aren't psychologists, and try to take his best ideas and, bring them to life and make them relevant in 2025. So his original Flow book was written in the 80s, published in the early 90s. And it was at a time that was so different than what we're all facing here in 2025. And I'm going to give you just a few things, and you can ask me more, questions about this. But Mahali's main point is we should have control and learn how to control what we pay attention to in our lives. And there are these deep flow experiences when, we get into an activity, a sport, a hobby, even work, where we're fully focused and, kind of at our peak performance, and everything else is just out of our mind in the background. So those were the things he focused on a lot in his research, and his first book is these really deep flow experiences. Fast forward to 2025, and most of us live in a world of really high technology where all kinds of people are competing for our attention. So if you don't learn the principles in Flow 2.0, pretty much an algorithm or a set of algorithms are running your life.
Yep.
The minute you log on, and depending on how you interact on the internet and so forth, your attention, is not your own. You're not guiding it. But what we talk about in the book is there's ways now to retain that control and have a much better life. And it's not getting off social media or not using AI. It's developing an awareness of how to use it in a managed and controlled way, so you still have the best things in life, even though technology can really enhance our flow and enhance our lives. So I'm pro technology, but also the human being and the way they interact with the technology is so critical. And Macaulay didn't have to deal with any of that. People back when he wrote this, did not have, all the factors we have taking our attention.
Yeah, that seems to be the major battle current people have to face. Like, I think one other author has this analogy saying, like, once you wake up, you have to wrestle with this information monster. Like, it's like, it's surrounding you. But as you said, it's not the information, is like our inability to have a model to deal with it. And then because that monster developed so rapidly in the past, in the pretty rapid time. And also, I think in the book, he actually talked about like attention fragmentation. Like because of that, the fundamentals of getting into flow, which is, you know, you have a focused attention for a long time. And now I think that's such a rare commodity now. And then because many people suffer from this fragmentation of attention. So if that's the case, are we losing the ability to enter the state of flow?
Um, so we call this fragmentation time confetti. I don't know if there's a translation for that in Chinese, but there's all these little pieces
Is of time.
coming
Yeah.
at us, and we're multitasking, we're having to attend, and if that's how you're living your life, you're spending very little time in flow. So our students and people that practice teaching people how to have a more focused life and have great moments of flow, talk about, first of all, just trying to develop an awareness of what you're putting your attention on, each day that you wake up and that monster is pulling you in all these directions. And then to like in your calendar, here's just some of the principles. The worst thing you can do is have a bunch of meetings on Zoom, which the monster throws at me all the time, and just have little breaks in between them, because it breaks your flow throughout the day. You get to the end of the day, you're exhausted. Using flow theory, you would put a set of meetings together that are on roughly the similar topics, and then you'd have big gaps where you'd have no meetings, no interruptions, so you could do more deep work on your calendar. And so flow experts can help you, develop a calendar each day to give you, more flow and well-being, in your life. But most people just are being pulled all over the place, with this time confetti and fragmentation, and are really struggling and suffering, with their well-being and mental health and so forth. So we feel, based on studying this, we can make a real impact by teaching people how to understand flow and manage their life in a way where they get this deep focus, this attention that generates good feelings, as opposed to just running all over the place and feeling exhausted every day.
Yeah, yeah. Just so you know, for the actually in the book, Stewart go into in part two, there was actually a chapter around the new digital and the hybrid world of work. Like, because I think when maybe people are listening to this are saying, "Oh, that sounds good," but well, I have a lot of, demands from work, and then that schedule that I can't control. I have to get on this meeting then, and then I can't really control what the next meeting would be. So I'm kind of being dragged around by the demands that's external. But I guess that's what this chapter again in this book is talking about. And then there are already examples of workplace making change as well on there. But before we go there, I think I want to go back to what you mentioned, how you manage your calendar. Like if you have some freedom. Like, I actually the book talk about it, but since we have you live, do you mind sharing a few tips with our audience? Like, for example, how you manage your calendar? How do you make, flow happen on a daily basis, even in a small way? Any suggestions for our listeners?
Yeah, yeah. Well, first thing is I'm not perfect or excellent or anything. I will tell you how I try to do this, and I have good days and days where I'm bouncing all over the place as well. But let me sort of give you my baseline calendar, and it's focused on having these states or these time blocks to do something that gets me in flow and supports what I call my perma-4 building blocks of flourishing. So in the morning, after I wake up, my wife and I every morning go down to the college track, and we walk and run on that track, always for an hour block. We're way slower than we used to be, and we're not athletes now in our 60s in any shape. She used to run marathons, and I did half marathons at one point. But to get out in nature, to make sure we get that first activity. Then my morning, if I've got a lot of people with demands, I'll put a set of Zoom meetings from 9 till noon. And and I try to cluster them in a way where it's not fragmented, but that doesn't always happen. And I don't have an assistant that touches my calendar because it's designed for flow. And assistants just take whatever comes in and put them on your calendar. So at noon, another 60 minutes where I either lift weights, run inside on like a treadmill, or my favorite thing is swim. That really gets me into flow. And I was swimming today, and I was just aware of how much work I do in the pool mentally as I'm swimming. I'm thinking about things, this interview, oh gosh, what am I going to say at 5 o'clock? So then when I get back, I have lunch 2 o'clock. Then there's another block till 5, except for today, because this one goes 5 to 6:30. So I do make exceptions, as you can see, and I, schedule work. Today, because I had my Zooms earlier, I wrote a couple of sort of chapters not complete, but in a book I'm working on. And so we'll do this 6:30, just before dark. We usually walk around the neighborhood to get out in nature again. And then I try my hardest not to work after that, because when I was younger, I'd work all hours, and I could see how it affected my relationship, my kids. And so that just gives you an example. It's got to, work for your life and world. But where the tension is, if you let your mind tell you, oh, there's not enough hours in the day for the other stuff, and you're never going to get all your work done. The problem is the work design. And a lot of times it's companies that are doing this to us, right? So a lot of the consulting work that we do is at the supervisor level, and you gotta help people, have enough flow in their life, to love what they're doing with you, but also to be, do the best work. And so, but if you get in a situation where, you're just being taken advantage of, and they don't really care about your well-being and health, it's hard to battle these forces.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I think it's the it seems like the key is one, two of them is around exercise and being in nature, and then kind of how do you start and put in the middle of your day. And also in the middle is continued like 3 hours of work block. Like how do you take a break in between? Because 3 hours is pretty long as well if you continue like work continuously.
Yeah. I don't. A lot of times I'm in flow when I'm working.
Mm-hmm.
And, it depends what I'm doing. A lot of different calls. Um, I'll tell you in just a second the type of flow that I try to get into, but it doesn't. If somebody's mad at me or doesn't, it's got conflict, I don't get into flow. But if we're, talking about things that, we're working on together, my favorite kind of flow is what we call in the book social flow,
Mm-hmm.
flowing together. And Mahali and Seligman, they like individual flow. They love to like just get in isolation and write. And if you look at my publications, most of them are with other people,
Mm.
because I love to get into the state with other people, and it picks up our great need for the building block of positive social relationships.
Yeah.
But no, a social flow, I can stay in a long time. But if I'm, writing or doing, yeah, 3 hours isn't that long for me. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll have like, some water or something, but that's flow, that's focus. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can relate to that. Actually, just like the day before yesterday, last week, I was writing because I'm working on the writing project as well. I was sitting there when I got up, it's like been 5 hours. I was like, how can I sit there for 5 hours? But of course, my leg complain, right? And my my bottom complains. Ah, you
Yeah.
have to stretch a bit. But you're right. Yeah, yeah. Well,
You
thank
were
you.
in flow, you must have been.
That's right. Yeah, no, but I feel like my brain is being fried, and it was like, I felt like literally that's how I felt. I was like, it's like like a fan or the AC being running for 5 hours. You kind of need to put some cold water on top of it. Yeah, and then I love when you talk about social flow. Again, get a copy of this book because the book talk about this collective flow, which is new. I didn't, as you said, I didn't read about it before because people think about flow as a pretty private experience, right? So it's something that I'm surfing on the board myself, or, I'm writing on my own. Like, that's usually people associate flow with. It's a private experience, it's my experience. And then the way you talk about collective flow is awesome. Can you elaborate a bit more? Because again, you can find it in the book, and then there's more elaboration there. But I want you to share with us a bit.
Yeah,
What is it? How do we create it?
sure.
And
Yeah.
yeah, please.
Well, I find, and people give me feedback on this, that it's helpful to start with an example. And, rather than give you the theory behind it, I can do some of that as well. But so as I grew up, and I don't know, probably like 18 years old, getting out in the ocean and mastering the surfboard versus all the other things I was supposed to be doing at that age, was an experience where I would get into that individual flow. And, loved it because it fit right on the skills and challenges map that we talk about. And, I would get into that flow channel. In my mid 20s, I had my first son, and followed a couple of years. Actually, I had my daughter and then my two sons. And when they were small, I would teach and bring them with me and teach, but I would still have to be out in the water, getting individual flow, and it was really nice. But once they learned how to do it, there's no better flow than being out there with my kids, enjoying it together. And I try to always do that now and not do individual flow in surfing because it's so much better. And plus, if a shark hits you, you're better off if other people are around you than if you're out by yourself in a remote place. In the workplace, I would much rather work in a team, than in isolation in my office. I would much rather have a leader. I talk about a positively energizing leader that we work together on, challenges or problems. So, and again, Mahali, I don't think would agree with me on this, but it's because he was really an amazing, writer, thinker, and he did that in individual flow, not this, collective or group flow that I love. I like regular flow, but it's just such a higher quality experience for me. If you look in sports, of various types, I don't want to throw my favorite out because it's probably not yours. But there's all this research that shows when a team is all on the same, page and working together, they can like perform at a level that's way higher than their, average level. So I think, and I'm, trying to do some work on this, that, the future of this field, because this is fairly new and smaller than the body of knowledge than individual flow, but this collective flow can change organizations, can change communities. So that would be something. And think about your friends, your family, and how good it feels when you guys are in social flow together.
Yeah. And I just want to refer to this, the charts that Stewart mentioned is this one. If you get the copy of the book, is on page 22 in the Chinese version, where there is, I don't know if you can see it, but I think this is a brilliant chart. Before we get to the collective part, it's talking about how if you imagine two axes, one is skill, one is challenge, right? So when your skill is high and challenge is high, that's when you get to flow. Basically, that's what this chart is saying. And if, when your skill is high or challenge is low, you basically get into relaxation or boredom, I guess. But on the other hand, if your skill is low and challenge is high, then you get into anxiety because you can't manage it, right? So I think that's just one of the brilliant charts of many brilliant charts in the book.
Can I say something more on that?
Yes, please go ahead.
So that what Mahali taught us was there's three main emotions here that we feel, and you just laid them out. But we're either in boredom, where we're just there and we don't know what to do with ourselves, nothing, or we're in anxiety, really like concerned and stressed out. Or when your skills and challenges match, that's when you get into the flow channel. So I sometimes give talks to huge audiences, and I'm like, bouncing in that anxiety. So, oh God, what if I don't, remember what I'm going to say, or, they don't like it. I never get, bored when I'm facing a big audience, but I'm worried they're going to get bored. They're going to be in that state. So I have these little tricks that, once I'm introduced, that if I can just find flow, then everything's going to be okay. But if I stay up in that anxiety state, it's really choppy. It doesn't, come across very well. So whenever you're in, any performance situation like that, think about how do you find flow? Because when you get in there, that's when you're at your best, you're talking clearly, and it's just a wonderful place to be there. And in the book, we talk about ways to find flow.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and then going to the collective flow, since we were on that topic, I think you're also in the book again also laid out I think 10 elements, right? Getting into collective flow. And we might not have time to go through all 10, but can you find, pick a few to elaborate a bit more, like how, because I think all you should know all 10 because they're really good. But yeah, and then like again, you find get the book yourself, you can see them. But can you find a few, like
Yeah,
maybe pick a few of your
yeah.
favorite?
Do
Yeah, share
you,
with us.
yeah, let me, do you have the page up that you're
Yeah,
referring
yeah. I
to?
have the Chinese page. So
Oh, that's right.
but I'll try to find it. And then I think the
No, no,
uh
I can,
like listening
yeah.
actively there. And then, oh, maybe there's also this one if you see it.
So in there, we talk about these factors of collective flow. And one thing, just so you know, I don't know, which I feel really strange about. The book is being translated into other languages as well. Japanese, I think, is coming out next, but
Mhm.
Chinese was the first. Is, they showed me a copy and I can't read a word of it. I'm like, wow, I wonder what they could have said all kinds of things in this, but I know some of our original figures and stuff, may be different in Chinese. Um, but the kinds of factors that we're talking about is, first of all, the group's goal,
Mm.
being really clear as a team or as a work group, what your goal or goals are. Um, Very close listening to one another. It's to get into team flow, you've got to have a lot of clarity about what each person is, going to be doing. Complete concentration. You can't have a couple of people looking at their phone or having, AI experiences or goofing around. Everybody's got to be, together and, focusing on these goals. We, you know, being in control, the group's got to be in control of what it's doing. Blending egos. I don't know how egos come across in Chinese, but in the U.S. we've got a lot of big
He
egos.
goes.
People, are trying to, further their own aims, not the group's aims. Equal participation is a really important factor, and people with big egos sometimes, forget their teammates have good input. And I'll stop there for a moment. That should give you kind of the flavor. But again, what Mahali taught us, and what we're trying to teach in this book, is there's ways to design this in your work, in your life. And once you have the awareness, you have a much better chance of thriving and flourishing in your work and in your life.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think I have to say the Chinese version because I have both Chinese and English. They did basically one-to-one mapping. So there's
Ah,
something. Yeah, they did an excellent job. So like and then CITIC is a top-notch publisher for your book. So the everything was done. There's no new charts. And then which is the only thing is because the I think the original one or I got the e-version of the English one has color and this one doesn't. And this one has is black and white.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, they did an excellent job translating. But
Oh,
one of the things yeah, thank you for mentioning again, for our readers can get a book, get a copy of the book，大家可以在看到那本书啊，自己看到英文版。And and I think it was interesting because in the book you also quoted this famous Google study, Project Aristotle, and talking about how they studied kind of high performing teams. I think really kind of line up with the collective flow you talked about.
right.
Um, right. So I think in the book, I can sort of read a page from the book just so you know. That's if you get a copy of the book on the Chinese version is 58. So everything starts with number one, which is psychological safety, meaning like they feel safe to take risk, be vulnerable in front of each other, and they don't have to be competing to prove themselves. So that's number one. And number two is dependability, right? So like, we get things done, and each can depend on each other. And number three is structure and clarity. Like we know what our roles are and what the plans are and goals. And number four is meaning. So like after all that, like there's a deeper sense of meaning to what you do. And then eventually number five is impact. So like then the work you do has real impact. Is it bringing a new product? Is it, influencing people's life? Is bringing innovation to a field, or even just to make money, right? So like basically you have, like it feels a bigger impact than the superficial results. Yeah, so I think it was quite fascinating because the what Stewart laid out in the book around the 10 elements are really contributing factors to those kind of five layers of organizational effectiveness. All
Well,
right.
that's great. So my graduate student who is Chinese and is in China now, she came to me one day and said, I got this, call from this publisher she had worked with, and they want me to translate your book into Chinese. And so I have, little knowledge of is this a great publisher or they said a simplified edition. So I'm like, oh, okay, what did they take out? But what you just said and how you I saw the exact chart you were talking about or the figure. So I'm so happy and have so much more confident that the book is pretty much what we have in English.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think by simplified, they mean simplified Chinese as opposed to traditional Chinese.
Oh, okay.
It's a different, yeah. So it's not simplified the content. It's a type of language.
Yeah, great.
Perfect. Yeah, yeah. They did an excellent job, and because they were also publisher of my first book, so
Oh, wow.
they are the sort of top publisher in the field. So no worries, you're in good hands.
Oh, good.
Um, and also going back to I think a little bit on the other concept I want to explore, or have you elaborate with us, is the where you mentioned around flow and macro flow on the personal level, like can you tell a bit more, like what's the difference between the two and how do we see it happening in our lives?
Yeah. So microflow is, focused on sort of short experiences, throughout our days and weeks and so forth. Where in macro flow, it's more of a long-term strategy, vision, something you're going to accomplish in your life, and you go into deep flow often to do that. But as we talked about earlier, as the world has changed, there's much more micro flow, moments. It's very realistic that you can, have multiple micro flow moments, and that's a good place to start. But also, the more macro long-term things are important as well.
Mm. But for microflow, I think one thing people get absorbed into is all those short videos, right? Because I think that's how it was interesting. It's a huge phenomenon in China already. I'm sure similar in the States. Like people get absorbed in, like the equivalents of TikToks. And then like everything is like 30 minutes and 30 seconds long or a minute long. And you just keep watching because everyone seems to be an interesting one. So is that a bad example of many so-called microflows?
Yeah. So I want to go back to Mahali on this one, because it used to be, the TikTok kind of thing was, people that use, drugs or alcohol or so forth to try to get in, a better consciousness state. And what he called this is junk flow.
Mm.
So if you think about it, if you're looking at, a TikTok and it's funny and so forth, you're not really, in that, state where your skills and your, the challenge is what's getting you into this great state. You're sort of in a passive entertainment kind of, state. And so he passed before TikTok was really big, but I think he would call that another example of junk flow, and not really, be these deep thought sort of things that, are short, which is good flow, micro flow. Um, he had these theories around, first of all, most of our social ills and challenges are because, people are either bored, or anxious, and they're not getting into, true flow. But people are so driven to a flow state, they try to mimic it with junk flow, and
Mm.
that's, drug addiction and all these distractions. Now, things like TikTok and AI and so forth. So that's a really good question, but I think that's how he would answer it.
Yeah, I think it's like uh, like a small dose digital drugs.
Yeah.
Yeah, but how do we resist it? Because I think that's a challenge for many. Because in the past, when you have drugs or alcohol, at least people know that's not good, right? But I think the thing currently with algorithm and all that, same things seem to be okay. Maybe you're learning something, like they're teaching you, they're telling you something that's happening to some people in the world. Because most of them are not like bad on surface. But people get absorbed into it. I think that's something like modern people challenge a lot. Like the junk flow seems to be quite overwhelming, at least the supply of it.
Right. Yeah. So what I do a little bit of Perma 4 in Flow 2.0, but the full book on Perma 4 with all the examples of how to live a life of well-being and flourishing is when you look at your 9 building blocks of human flourishing, you look at how is the TikTok or these little things affecting those building blocks. And it's possible they may, and I think they are probably in many cases, the first building block is your positive emotions.
Yep.
And if they're giving you positive emotion, that's good for your human flourishing. If they're taking away from your achievement building block, for example, you do that so much. We have people that kind of live in their parents' basements, and all they do is TikTok and gaming and so forth. And that becomes counterproductive. And it affects, their social relationships and, their physical health and so forth. So what I use now, we have 25 years of science behind positive psychology, are these building blocks to help me understand if what any particular individual is doing is good for their flourishing or, is too much and hurting their ability to flourish. So hear me, a lot of people don't talk like this, but a lot of technology is really good and can help us, live a good life. And if you don't use it well, it can, make you struggle and suffer. And the other thing I do in the PERMA 4 is get into money and economic security in particular. And what I've learned about all that research is somebody really wealthy can be insecure, and somebody without a lot of money can be secure. I mean, there's extremes on this, but it's how you use your money that's the key to your happiness. So you don't have to have a lot, but what you do have, how you use it really makes a difference in your ability to live a good life.
Yeah. Thank you. I think maybe just for the more for our readers, in case you you maybe just a bit recap of what PERMA and PERMA for. Again, you can actually find it in the book. They did a one-to-one copy of your chart.
Oh,
Um,
good.
and then yeah, so there's basically think about imagine a flow or it's a house, right? So there are pillars. Originally, the PERMA is PERMA, and P stands for positive emotions. Basically, experiencing happiness, joy, love, gratitude, in here and now. And E is engagement, like you're basically absorbed or doing something, right? You're engaging activities. And R is relationship, like you have ability to establish and maintain a positive and mutually beneficial relationship with others. And meaning, right? So the experience of connected to something larger than self and serving a higher purpose. And number 5 is accomplishment, like experience a sense of mastery over something. I've achieved something. And that's what, Stewart was saying. Sometimes positive emotion doesn't lead to accomplishment or leads to the negative of it, the lack of it. So that's the original 5. And then the plus 4 are the 4 things that's added, which number 1 is the physical health. I think we talk about the high level of biological, functional, psychological health assets. You have that. And M is mindset. So basically a growth mindset. We talked like 心态 in Chinese, right? What's your future? Do you have a future-oriented view of life? And how do you view setbacks and challenges? And how do you, turn them into opportunities for growth? And number 3 is environment, which is both, I would say, the spatial elements, access to natural light. I think what Stewart talked about, I talk about on my channel as well. Like you go out in the morning, have a walk, being in nature, fresh air, physical safety, and all that. And also basically that's actually quite important. Sometimes we underestimate how that impact our life. And the last one is what Stewart just said, economic security. And I like this word, I'll read it out. It says perception of financial security and stability as required to satisfy individual needs. So it's a perception. It's not like, as I think you nailed it. It's not like how much money you have. You will see all those billionaires still living in a very insecure life. Is how you view your financial security is a perception by you. So basically, it's the original 5 plus the 4. I think that did an excellent job, almost kind of explaining the 9 pillars of happiness or flow or entering flow. So just want to put it in again. If you get a book, the book has a detailed explanation of all that.
Well, you did that wonderful, better than I do. So congratulations.
You must have
You know
done
a
that
lot
millions of
about
times.
positive psych.
Thank you. Yeah, and then I think maybe now we're over the hour mark. The last 2 questions I have. I think one is around education, right? Because you are a father of 3, right? You mentioned you have a daughter and 2 sons. Am I right? You have 3 kids.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And then like how like lots of people listening to our talk would be parents as well. I think they're one on the one hand, of course, learning to how to be better ourselves. And then I think a big question on their mind is that now we brought our kids into this era. Like they were born in a digital era, and kids start to have devices at a very young age. So what are the some practices we can take to our homes in supporting our children to achieve, to take good to take advantage of all the science and learnings in positive psychology.
Well, there's a field that is like a subfield of positive psychology called positive education.
Mm,
And there are also positive psychologists that have applied what we've been talking about to parenting. And one way to think of it is, strength-based parenting or positive psychology, informed parenting. But this is where you have your greatest opportunity. And 5 weeks ago, sorry, another story, I had my fourth kid, my first grandchild, and he lives by me. So I am now babysitting and doing everything I can to help this little baby flourish. And thinking about everything we, studied in positive psychology and, all the stages and, the development. And, it's reminding me of doing this with my other three when I knew very little about positive psychology. I was just kind of sorting that kind of thing out, and didn't feel like I was very well prepared for parenting, and we were making it up as we go. But kids get into the flow state really easy, if you set the right conditions. They love to play, they love to be creative, and I'm in flow the minute I get to his house until I leave, because I just am so, focused on this little guy's, development. And guy cries uncontrollably at times, and I'm still right there with him in flow. A lot of people get very frustrated with that. But just as we use positive psych to design a workplace or an educational system, think about how you use it, to design the best childhood or upbringing you can possibly do as a parent. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, and for mothers especially, this is the hardest job I know of. But our vision is the more young parents we can teach about positive psychology, the more fulfilled, productive, kids we're gonna, have in the world. And when you look at, at an adult population level, who's really challenged in life and, has a lot of the outcomes we don't want, it's almost always this parenting experience that you can get back to, including, some of the terrible shootings that we see and violence and so forth. When you really pull it apart, they grew up with the opposite of everything we've been talking about today. That's for me, a real shame. But as parents, we can make a huge difference by understanding, well-being, what helps us flourish in life, and then trying to give that to these, precious, almost blank slates, other than personality, that we're responsible for.
Yeah. I'm even thinking there should be a Perma Plus 4 poster or something like that you can put on your wall.
I'll get to work on it.
Yes, please. And you can make a cardboard version for the kids.
You're coming up with great ideas tonight. Or it's morning for you, right?
Yeah, it's morning for me.
Oh, that's why you're fresh. Okay.
Exactly. I just I just had my morning walk. Thank you. Yeah, and I think the because I was just reflecting myself because I have three kids as well, and they're still young, and then my oldest is 15, and youngest is 11. And it is hard because, as you said, because I think it's probably parenting is the place where like everything meets, right? So there's like unstop, like there's so much work you have to do, and then as you said, and then the work, some of them is about mental, spiritual, but a large portion of them just chores because you have to take care of them and all that. Of course, they ended up doing some of themselves. So like it feels like a hardest place to practice flow. But I think on the other hand, this book actually offers also like the micro flow, for example. I think that's when I echo a lot with is saying, how do you like even when you're just doing the dishes, like, what are the 5 minutes where you can not only, be doing something, but actually assigning relationship meaning like for example the chore chart I was even because we have a chore chart for the kids, it's not just to do the work, it's a engagement and relationship, right? So like it's even like the life as mundane as it is, if we know the concepts behind it, we can actually have a connection to the elements of the Parma framework. Is it is that right?
Absolutely. And I'm now just talking personally, what I try to do with the chores and things like that is figure out how to make them a game and fun and doing them, not individual, like you go do that, but, doing it together, that kind of collective flow experience. And, one of the things Mahali taught us was that a good life, a flourishing life is an individual creation. The same things don't work for everybody. We got to try different things and then figure out what works for me. So I know a lot of people would hate, surfing to find flow or even swimming, oh my God, I'm going to get wet in my hair. And I used to feel that way, by the way. But at this stage of my life, there are certain things, not, all the things in positive sight that really work well for me. And so, I try to build those into my life and other things I know I should be doing, but I just don't like them or I can't stick with them. I can show them to other people, but, they don't really work for me. But playing games with my kids just and trying to be happy even when you're doing chores or things you homework really worked well for me. And my first two kids have PhDs and are doing one does health, the other does positive psych. His wife is a positive psychologist. I'm just getting so lucky on this. And the youngest, like, no more research in this family. I'm going to teach kindergarten. And he teaches, kids and just loves what he does.
Wonderful. Yeah, yeah, making everything into a game. That's so true. Because this past weekend, the entire afternoon, we spent time basically cooking. Like, we were trying to use some new therapy, and it's really messy in the kitchen, but it was a collective. Now, like reading the book, I was like, wow, that we're creating a collective flow despite all the mess we made. And yeah, yeah, putting into a game. That's a very wise recommendation. I think that's the thing because sometimes it feels like life is such a hardship, and also in the book, I'll just read the quote that Stewart just used. It's a Mihail book said, "A joyful life is an individual creation that cannot be copied from a recipe." That was a from Mihaly in 1990. And then the other quote I really like, since I'm on it, is also in the book. Again, I have a good Chinese translation for that as well. It is also from Mihaly. It says, people who learn to control inner experience will be able to determine the quality of their lives, which is as close as any of us can come to being happy. Yeah, so it's all about doing the, sorry, give me 1 second, I'll open the door. Okay. All right, so it's about creating, not only controlling, but creating an inner experience, right? So that's what you're saying. If you make it into a game, it's basically a inner decision to make it into a different experience.
Yeah. Well, my wife's biggest complaint in all of this is I didn't have great games set up for how to clean up after the cooking and so forth. And she ended up doing a lot more than her fair share. So with the new guy, I've got to figure this one out.
Exactly. You need to train him to do housework early on.
Exactly. It's a game.
Exactly, through a game. And the last question I have, Stuart, is about AI, right? Because I think you mentioned quite a few times that you are pro technology, as opposed people might think that people want to stay away. So how do we better use technology and in the age of AI to foster well-being personally and collectively?
Yeah. So again, we have all this sort of knowledge now about flow and the lack of flow in our lives. We have these 9 building blocks of perma 4 that you laid out, and these are kind of the big contributions I see of positive psych. There's a lot to them. There's a lot of details on our emotions and our relationships and so forth. So what a number of my students are now doing as dissertations is they're trying to understand how artificial intelligence, social media, and things like this can be, quote, practiced in a way that enhances, your perma 4, your flow experiences, your well-being, and so forth. One of the most recent dissertations had what's called an AI coach. And
Mm,
the idea is that we just don't have enough, coaches or positive psychologists or therapists in the world, given how many people are, struggling and suffering with, in the US especially. I mean, we're in really different bad conditions right now that many people are experiencing. So with an AI coach, and as opposed to a human coach, it can teach you these principles, help you set goals, play games with you based on your input and your interaction with it. And the idea is that it enhances a human coach's ability, to help you design and live a good life where you've got healthy kids and a good job and so forth. And so we're just starting to, test this out. We're seeing, some promising things, and we're also seeing things that, aren't working. And there's certain kinds of people that love and feel comfortable interacting with AI, and others don't want to. They think that information is going to go right to, somebody that's going to use it against them. But if we don't figure out how to apply positive psych when we're using technology, I really think it's going to ruin our well-being and ability, to live a good life. So it's not the technology that's bad, it's, learning how to use it well.
mm. Yeah. Yeah, I hope that AI coach can be more prevalent. Okay, thank you so much. Enjoy your walk. Okay, bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye. Okay.